Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle, and this is another in my Mystery Through History series. I love historical mysteries. They are my absolute favorite genre. They're my go-to genre. And so I thought, in honor of Victober, I would share with you 8 of my favorite Victorian Historical Mystery series. The era of the reign of Queen Victoria is one of my favorite eras to read historical mysteries in, as you'll be able to tell because I have 8 different series to share with you. Victoria reigned from 1837 to 1901, I believe, 1901 or 1902. And so it was a great era. It was an era of revolution, as in industrial revolution. It was an era of scientific discovery. It was an era of kind of, at some point there, the start of the suffrage movement. All kinds of things happened during that reign, and it makes for a really interesting time period to put a historical mystery in. So let's just delve right into these 8 series, and then at the end I'm going to share with you a series that I have not read yet, but has really piqued my interest, and I will definitely read very soon. These are in no particular order, so let's just dive right in. The first series I want to talk about is Elizabeth Peters' Amelia Peabody series. This is a series of 20 books written between 1975 and 1975 and 2010. Only 8 of the books in this series are set during the Victorian era, but I figured that that was enough to talk about it. So Amelia Peabody is a Victorian woman. She is intelligent. She wants more out of her life, and at the beginning of this book, when her father dies, she decides to go to Egypt and finally kind of see firsthand the things that interested her. She's interested in archaeology and history, and so she makes her way to Egypt. The Crocodile on the Sandbank, this is the first one in the series. This is set in 1884. The Curse of the Pharaohs is 1892. The Mummy Case is 1894. The Lion in the Valley, 1895. Deeds of the Disturber from 1896. The Last Camel Died at Noon is in 1897. The Snake, the Crocodile, and the Dog is 1898, and then The Hippopotamus Pool is 1899. These books are written in the first person. They have great characters. This is a little more of a light-hearted series. It's humorous, but still with good mysteries in it. Most of them take place in Egypt, although some of them do take place back in England. And so yeah, if you're looking for a little bit more of a light-hearted series, a humorous series, you might want to check out the Amelia Peabody series. And I thought, just for fun, I'm going to read the first sentence of each of these books. So here we go. When I first set eyes on Evelyn Barton Forbes, she was walking the streets of Rome. Alright, next up is a series by Granger. And this is her Lizzie Martin Inspector Ross series. The first book in the series is called A Rare Interest in Corpses. This is a series that started in 2006, and it is ongoing. There are 8 books in the series so far. The first book is set in 1864, and the last book is set in 1870. These are also told in first person, but what I find fascinating about this series is that first person point of view alternates between Lizzie Martin and Inspector Ben Ross. And so you'll get certain chapters, and it's not one chapter after another, but you'll get, a few chapters, and then it'll switch in Lizzie Martin's perspective, first person, and then it'll switch to Inspector Ben Ross. And I find that really interesting. It kind of proves that they're both really important characters in the series. So I really enjoy this series. In the first one here, she arrives in London to become a lady's companion. She's barely out of the station when her cab encounters a wagon carrying the remains of a young woman recently dead. At her new home, Lizzie learns that her predecessor, Madeline Hexam, disappeared without a word of warning. Despite rumors of immoral behavior surrounding the girl's departure, Lizzie is soon persuaded that there's a deeper mystery here. Her suspicions are tragically confirmed when Inspector Benjamin Ross delivers shocking tidings. Lizzie is determined to unravel the truth about the lost Miss Hexam, as too is Ben Ross, a man who cares about justice, whatever the class of victim. But they must tread carefully, as a cornered killer is the most dangerous of all. I really enjoy this series, but I have not actually read all of the series because they're not, it's not the type of series that comes out one book every year. And so I just kind of ended up forgetting about the series a little bit. So I've actually only read, I think I read the first 4 or 5 in the series. But I'm definitely going to continue and go back and do a reread because I really like this series. And then we have Deanna Raybourn's Silent in the Grave. This is the first in her Lady Julia Grey series. This was written in 2007, and there are 10 books in the series, but I'm just going to say a big but here. The series runs from 2007 to 2020 to this year. However, only the first 5 in the series are novels, and that's what I have read. The last are novellas, and the 2020 book that they brought out is actually a bind-up of those novellas. I can only speak to the novels in this series. I haven't actually read the novellas, and I think that it's perfectly fine to just read the first 5 if you can't get a hold of the novellas, or if you if you prefer a full-length novel. So this first book in the series is set in 1886, and then it goes up to 1889. So this is a really tightly plotted series, tightly set. What am I trying to say? It's set in a really tight span of time, as opposed to covering a long span of time. So the main characters are Lady Julia Grey and Nicholas Brisbane, who is a private inquiry agent. This series is, I would say it's a little bit darker. Not really dark, and it's not hugely violent or anything like that. But just the tone of the series is definitely not lighthearted. But the characters are really interesting. Let the wicked be ashamed and let them be silent in the grave. These ominous words, slashed from the pages of a book of Psalms, are the last threat that the darling of London society, Sir Edward Grey, receives from his killer. Before he can show them to Nicholas Brisbane, the private inquiry agent that he has retained for his protection, Sir Edward collapses and dies at his London home in the presence of his wife Julia and a room full of dinner guests. And this one has a fantastic first sentence. To say that I met Nicholas Brisbane over my husband's dead body is not entirely accurate. Edward, it should be noted, was still twitching upon the floor. So if you're looking for a slightly darker in tone Victorian mystery with a dash of romance thrown in, this could be the series for you. And then I'm going to talk about 2 series by Anne Perry, and these are famous Victorian historical mysteries because they've been around for so long. The first one is the Charlotte and Thomas Pitt series. This first book, The Catter Street Hangman, was written in 1979. There are 32 books in this series, so it's a bit of a commitment. The last one was published in 2016. This series covers the years from 1881 to 1899. The main character is Thomas Pitt, who starts the series as an inspector with Scotland Yard, and he ends the series as the head of Special Branch. So one interesting thing, as the series progresses, he moves around in his career, but he is always a detective. And then the other main character is Charlotte, who becomes his wife. Charlotte comes from a well-to-do, you know, solid middle-class family. She's not an aristocrat, but her father, he's a banker or something. They've got money and they're happy in that solid middle class, enough that they are, you know, somewhat, her dad can be somewhat pretentious and kind of really happy with their status in life, to the point where, like, you know, he's the type of person that would tell the police officer to use the tradesman's entrance, that kind of thing. The one thing that attracted me to this series is that so much of social issues are addressed in these stories. So they're just good, solid mysteries, but the characters are really interesting, and because it's so long-standing, you really get to know them. And the books deal with interesting social issues. Obviously, a lot about justice. There's some politics, but mostly social issues of the day, which I find really fascinating. And so, the first sentence from the Catter Street Hangman. Charlotte Ellison stood in the center of the withdrawing room, the newspaper in her hand. The other series that Anne Perry writes is the Monk series, the William Monk series, and this is actually my favorite. Of the two, I like this one more. This series has 24 books. It started in 1990 with this, The Face of a Stranger, and went until 2018. This first book starts at the end of the Crimean War, 1856, and goes until 1871. And the reason I love this series, I think, more than the other one is the character of William Monk. When this book opens, he wakes to find himself in hospital, and he has completely lost his memory. And he doesn't ever really get it back. He gets snippets here and there, but he has to learn his history from other people. And so that makes obviously that makes his life more difficult. But the fact that he is a Scotland Yard detective, I mean, that makes it even more complicated, because he no longer recognizes criminals that may have a grudge against him. He doesn't understand the politics and the relationships going on within Scotland Yard with the other detectives that he's worked with. And so he is at such a disadvantage, and I love that about this series. Watching him try to figure out who he is, what his background is, how he is perceived by other people. It's just really, really interesting. The other character in this is a woman he meets called Hester, who ends up becoming his wife. She is a nurse, and so we get a lot of what goes on with her. And, you know, that she'll work in hospitals or clinics, or she'll start clinics. And so, like the other series, there is a lot of social issues in these books that I really enjoy. The other thing that I really like about this series is another character called Oliver Rathbone, who is a barrister. And so very often you will get courtroom scenes in these books. So these are like historical mystery / courtroom drama, courtroom thriller, and I really like that combination. And so of the two, I would say that this one is my favorite of the series, and it opens with this sentence. He opened his eyes and saw nothing but a pale grayness above him, uniform like a winter sky, threatening and heavy. All right, let's move on to Charles Finch's series. This first in the series is called A Beautiful Blue Death, and his main character is Charles Lennox, a Victorian gentleman sleuth. This first book is set in 1865, and there are now 14 in the series. The 14th is set to come out next year, 2021. So this was published in 2007. The series runs from 1865 until the last book is 1878, the one that's coming out next year. What's interesting about this series is that the 3 books published between 2018 and 2020 are actually prequels. The author decided to do a prequel trilogy, which is really interesting. So the main series runs from 1865 to 1878, but the prequel trilogy is set in 1850, 1853, and 1855. Charles Lennox is a great character. He is described as a Victorian gentleman and armchair explorer. I like the description on the back. One of the reviews says that Finch presents us with a unique sleuth who combines the deductive powers of Sherlock Holmes with the people skills of Thomas Pitt. So I thought that was really interesting. This is told in third person. And the opening sentence is, "The fateful note came just as Lennox was settling into his armchair after a long, tiresome day in this city." This is another series that deals with really interesting issues of the day, and it has great characters. All right, 2 more. Next up is And Only To Deceive by Tasha Alexander. This is a series told in the first person. Lady Emily is the main character, and she's a great character. She is very intelligent. When the book opens, she's newly widowed, but she is very intelligent. She enjoys studying Greek and reading ancient classics. And so she's really like a woman out of her time. It wasn't really acceptable for women to desire to study and better themselves in that way. And so she's an interesting character. This first book was published in 2005. The series is ongoing, and there are currently 15 books in the series. It starts in 1887, and the last book in the series is set in 1902. So we are no longer in the Victorian era. So if you want to read if you want books that are strictly Victorian, you would go, you would want to read like the first 14 in the series, which is plenty long enough, isn't it? The first sentence in this series: "Few people would look kindly on my reasons for marrying Philip. Neither love nor money nor his title induced me to accept his proposal." Interesting. And then finally, this is the Liberty Lane series by Caro Peacock. This first book was published in 2007, and it's called A Foreign Affair. It's also titled Death at Dawn. The first few books in this series have 2 different names depending on whether you have the UK edition or the American edition. The first book in the series was published in 2007. There are 9 books in the series. The last one came out in 2018. The first book is set in 1837, so right at the very beginning of the Victorian era, and the last book is in 1847. So we get a 10-year span of time there. Liberty Lane is a great character. The books are told in the first person, and in this first book where we meet her, the book is described as an irresistible blend of history, adventure, and ingenious invention that brings an extraordinary new writer and a truly endearing and unforgettable heroine to the literary stage. The year is 1837. Queen Victoria, barely 18, has just ascended to the throne of England, and a young woman named Liberty Lane has just had her first taste of true sorrow. Refusing to accept that her gentle, peace-loving father has been killed fighting a duel, she vows to see justice done. The trail she follows is a twisting and dangerous one, leading to the spirited young Englishwoman into an intricate weave of conspiracy. Contacted by secret agents, she is asked to pose as a governess in order to infiltrate cold, rambling Mandeville Hall and spy on its master, Sir Herbert Mandeville, who is at the center of a treasonous plot. Nothing at the hall is what it seems, and every turn reveals another deceit, another surprise, another peril, leaving Libby to wonder who to trust and embroiling her in a deadly affair that could destroy the young queen and place Libby herself in mortal danger. One thing I like about this series is that you get good, like, interesting cases that she gets. She becomes a private investigator, but there is often politics involved, spies, like kind of MI5 style more than MI6, because it's mostly set in England. But you know, so she'll get called on by the Prime Minister to help with something, or she'll get called in to help the royal family with something. So that kind of adds a different sort of feel or level to the story. So the Liberty Lane series is really interesting. So those are the 8 Victorian series that I wanted to tell you about. The one that I have not read yet is a series by Peter Lovesey, and this is his Sergeant Crib series. These books are set in the Victorian time period. There are 8 in the series. This first book was published in 1970, and the last book in the series was published in 1978. They are set between 1879 and 1888. And what intrigues me about this series is that each book kind of enters the world of something that is sort of uniquely Victorian. And that's what intrigued me about this series. So the main character is a Scotland Yard detective, Sergeant Crib. So this first book in the series, Wobble to Death, is set in the midst of something that I had never heard of, but according to the author's note is real and was pretty popular at the time. So I'm just going to read the author's note. The characters in this novel are fictitious, but the setting is authentic. 6-day go-as-you-please contests, or wobbles, were instituted by Sir John Astley in March 1878 and became very popular on both sides of the Atlantic in the 80s. An Englishman, George Littlewood, set the record of 623 3/4 miles in New York in 1888, in spite of his foot being burned during the race when his alcohol bath caught fire. In 1966, physiologist B.B. Lloyd, writing in Advancement of Science, described Littlewood's feat as probably about the maximum sustained output of which the human frame is capable. So these wobbles were essentially pedestrian races. So they weren't running, they were walking, and they would walk for days. Like, it was an endurance race essentially. So really very interesting. The second book in the series is called The Detective Wore Silk Drawers, and that's about bare knuckle boxing, which was really popular for a time, and illegal. And so then of course there was like betting that would go on. The third book is called Abracadaver, which is set in the music halls, which was like that time of when variety shows were really popular. The fourth book is The Mad Hatter's Holiday, which is set in the resort town of Brighton. And so this was like when it was at its heyday as a resort town. The Tick of Death is about secret societies and bombs. So at that time, anarchists were this was a big thing. Anarchists and setting off bombs and all of that. A Case of Spirits is about the spiritualist movement, which was really popular, seances and the occult and all of that. Swing Together is about rowing, and Waxwork is about photography, but also Madame Tussauds and that whole thing of creating waxworks of famous people. So this is a series that really intrigues me. I currently have 3 in the series, and I am going to start it very soon. The first sentence of Wobble to Death. In the 12:05 a.m. trundled out of Highbury and Islington Station and along the line. Its rhythmic snorts were replaced by unmechanical sounds. Harsh, stomach-wrenching coughs echoed in the tunnel leading to the platform. Then the clatter of heavily shod boots and shoes. The unexpected influx of midnight passengers massed at the barrier, everyone muffled to the eyebrows and topped with a cap or bowler. A ticket collector, scowling under his cheese cutter, came out to draw back the grill. They filed through out of the booking hall and into a dense fog. Sorry, I read the whole first paragraph there. All right, so this is my series of Victorian mysteries. Do any of these sound intriguing to you? Have you read any of these series? I would love to chat about it in the comment section down below, and I will see you for another video soon. Bye.